All right, I do ask for the benefit of decorum and for people who are in low internet bandwidth areas that if you're not on the executive committee or if you're not currently speaking, if you could turn off your video and mute your microphone, I'd appreciate that. And then you are able to rename yourself if you want to make sure that displays your name and your state for the benefit of the secretary. Do you get any other information, Ms. Harlos, or is it just that?
That is all I get.
Okay.
But I doubt I'm going to be able to record everyone that is here. I will certainly be able to note in the minutes if I don't even know if we're having public comment, but if we are, certainly anyone who speaks. But
Right.
with it being 500 people, it gets crazy with the Zoom recording.
Right. Body can indulge just a second. I'm just sending the information to our counsel, Mr. Hall. Good, he's on. Everybody, I think, is here. So I will call us to order at 9:08. I apologize for being a little bit late. Welcome, Libertarians. A lot to discuss tonight. Before I go any further, I do want to share the news that one of our activists in Colorado, Kevin Goldbrinson, is in the hospital after a heart attack, and he's fighting for his life. I would ask for a moment of silence so we can all offer our prayers or reflections for his fast recovery. Thank you. All right, executive committee members, there is a lot of ways. Oh, let me repeat. If you're not on the executive committee or if you're not currently speaking, I'd appreciate if you could mute yourself and turn off your video. There's a lot of different ways we can proceed. In our regular meetings, we do public comment until it's exhausted prior to doing any other business. Tonight, I'm conscious that if we want to do public comment, there will probably be a lot of it. So what I would propose is that we do our attendance and any housekeeping items, then let members of the executive committee make any opening statements they want to make, which would include providing the language of any motions that may be intended to be offered tonight, and then proceed to public comment. And if we do want to do public comment, perhaps putting a time limit so that we can make sure we can hear from as many people as possible. Somewhere in there, Mr. Oliver Hall is present and able to give a report. Well, I'd welcome the comments of the executive committee on how you'd like to proceed.
I think your plan sounds good.
I would support that plan. There is the question of whether or not we should allow chat. So in the interest of moving forward on that, I think that will be the first order of business I propose, is that I motion to re-engage the chat for this Zoom call.
Okay.
And I would second that when, if we're making it at this point.
Well, in that case, Mr. Longstreth is, well, let's do attendance first, just so we get that out of the way.
Okay.
Secretary, if Madam Secretary, if you could call the roll.
Okay, certainly. Mr. Chair.
Here.
Mr. Mullman.
I'm here.
I'm here. Mr. Hagan.
Here.
Mr. Longstreth.
Present.
Ms. Epke,
Here.
and Mr. Phillips.
Here.
I do not believe I'm forgetting anyone unless I'm having a brain burp, Mr. Chair.
Sounds like, as it was anybody not called on the executive committee? It sounds like everybody's here then. We have quorum. First item was from Mr. Longstreth, seconded by Ms. Harlos to engage the chat. Is there objection?
Mr. Chair,
Senator Epke?
I don't inherently object to the chat. My only question would be, and this is a technology question, we've got 440 people roughly. If we have a chat going full steam, is that going to impact our bandwidth? I'm in a more rural community the way it is, and I would prefer not to get cut off. But I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer to that either, I'm afraid.
I believe if we limit video, wouldn't be a problem, but I would suggest we could address that if people in more rural areas all of a sudden started having issues. Text is generally very low bandwidth.
That sounds right. Mr. Smith?
I just wanted to say that the chat is, if you can turn it off on your screen so it doesn't pop up, and it will absolutely not affect your bandwidth whatsoever for your video. So
Thank you. Any objection? I don't think there was any, so we will do that. Mr. Harris, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, hang on, I can do that.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
It should be back up, I think. All right. Mr. Molman.
Yes. Can I don't know the right procedure on this. I don't know if we need to make a motion or if we can just agree. Can people in the chat keep it a little bit not awful? I mean, this is a very sensitive and very hot issue. If we can at least keep. Yeah, I know. I see the chat. I'm just looking for a way to try to have a good discussion this evening and a productive outcome. That's all.
Mr. Longstreth?
I proposed opening the chat. If I see it getting ugly, I will be one of the first people to propose shutting it down. So troll if you want. If it gets to a point that any of us thinks it is crossing that line, please, please, please do what you feel is right, and we will address it from there. In the meantime, let people talk, let people discuss. And as long as it doesn't get ugly, I want to trust that we are all reasonable people and, just see where it takes us from there. So, but if it does get bad, I just warn everybody in chat, I will not hesitate to motion if that's what's necessary.
All right. Ms. Harlos, do you not have
It
the hand
doesn't,
raised
no, it's
feature?
still, even though I'm not a host, it
Oh,
didn't
that's
give
weird.
me. I know.
All right, let me move your video so I don't miss you, but go ahead.
My opinion on this is unless somebody's making threats, actual threats to people. I've seen our YouTube live stream chats and they get wild. Lots of things get said, a great majority of them about me, and I can handle it. I put on my big girl knickers. So I would say unless somebody is making legal, like actual physical threats of harm, that we just ignore what we don't want to see. Let people emote.
All right, thank you. Let's see. So next I had proposed any housekeeping items. I don't think I have any. Ms. Harlos, do you have any housekeeping items?
No, sir.
All right. And then, well, I guess a question of opening statements, if we want to have a time limit on that. And then if we want to do public comment, if we want to do a time limit on that. I don't know if any member of the executive committee has a feeling on that. Mr. Phillips?
Oh, I'm sorry. I hit that button because I thought you were opening it for opening comments. I'll be short on mine. Other than that, I don't care.
Okay. Let's see. Well, we can go ahead and proceed on that. oh, I'm sorry. Oh, there's hands up. Are these hands up on procedure or on wanting to speak?
Mine's on procedure.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hagan.
I recommend maybe limit to 1 minute per speaker. 1 or 2 minutes is okay. Limit per speaker.
Is there any objection to that?
Mr. Chair, just to be clear, is that for the LNC members as well, or is that just the public comment?
Mr. Hagan?
For public comment.
Okay.
What limit on LNC, Mr. Hagan, if I may ask?
I wasn't thinking about LNC members during the public comment, so I guess, yeah.
I meant our opening
during the
statement.
Opening statements. No, just for the public comments section.
All righty. Why don't we go ahead and proceed to opening statements and.
I don't want to stand on the bridge.
Sorry. All right. Proceed to opening comments if members of the executive committee would want to start us off. Mr. Phillips.
I'll be brief. I would just remind everybody that the scope of what we can actually accomplish in this meeting and our authority is actually pretty limited, including our listeners, so they would know that. And that I would ask that we don't go beyond the scope of this meeting. And I would especially ask that we use this meeting to solve problems and not turn into a witch hunt. Thank you.
Mr. Longstreth.
I will also be very brief. I just remind members of this committee and the public that we do have another meeting scheduled for Friday at 9 p.m. and Saturday at 9 p.m. That if public comment is not able to be addressed during this time, that there are other options, as well as the ability to email us. Committee members, please remember that, as Mr. Phillips said, our scope of is somewhat limited, and that some may better deserve full LNC, but we certainly exercise the authority that we need to where we need to exercise and balance your actions with wisdom.
Thank you, Mr. Longstreth. Other members of the executive committee? Ms. Harless?
And do you think we need to remind people to turn off their video because bandwidth, who aren't on the executive committee? I'll keep my comments brief at all. I have a very limited goal for this evening, but just in general, over this whole issue, I think there are two broad issues. First, and this is my priority for this evening, is making the aggrieved legitimate affiliate in New Hampshire whole. And I believe the executive committee has the authority to do that. I do think there are serious internal issues that we need to deal with, but those can be reserved for the full LNC meeting, as I don't think the executive committee has the authority to deal with those. So I just wanted to make it very apparent to the public and anyone listening that my goal tonight is to help the people that have had their property stolen from them in New Hampshire.
Thank you, Ms. Harless. Other members of the executive committee? Mr. Mullman, I think you emailed that you have a motion that you're going to be offering. Would you mind reading that out loud just so people know that that's on the table?
I can, and fully acknowledging that no one's going to like it. The executive committee of the LNC continues to recognize the LPNH affiliates that held a convention in March of 2021 and directs the turnover of access to LPNH joint assets in the possession of the LNC to that committee.
Could you please read slower? I'm sorry, Mr. Mullman. I'm only so fast.
He did email it, Ms. Harless.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Unless or until such time as the full LNC takes action to disaffiliate that committee in accordance with our bylaws. The executive committee of the LNC asked the full LNC to form an investigatory committee for the purposes of studying the status of the LPNH and to make recommendations as to its affiliate status at the next in-person LNC meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mullman. Any other introductory comments from members of the executive committee? All right, I'll just say, by way of background, I've issued 4 statements on these matters. The vice chair's distributed a timeline that he's compiled. The secretary's uploaded several videos, and there have been about 1 or 2 million emails on the business list. You know, all of that's helpful background information. Temperatures are very hot. I get that. I think from my perspective, the committee would benefit most from public commenters who have facts to share. So I would ask the commenters to lead with any such information. If you're in New Hampshire, what you know. If you're not in New Hampshire, how New Hampshire's affected you. We've had a lot of speculation and opinion and rushes to judgment in the past few days. And ultimately, the LNC has to decide what it will do or not do, and we want your help on that. If you'd like to be added to the queue, go ahead and hit the hand raise button, and we'll work through as many people as we can. I did also want to say that, let's see. Well, due to schedules, we may have to pause public comments so that we can hear from our legal counsel or from motions from the committee. And I do also want to note that you can email your statements to the full LNC or to any individual members through the LP website's LNC contact page. And with that, we can go to public comment.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick point of personal privilege.
Yes, Mr. Longstreth.
Just so that I know, what is our end time on this meeting, or do we not have one?
We do not have one. If you'd like to put one, we can.
I would move that we limit this meeting to 2 hours.
Mr. Longstreth has moved that we limit this meeting to 2 hours, setting an adjournment at, I believe, 11:08 Eastern. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Phillips. Is there objection?
I object.
I object.
Objection, so we'll proceed to.
I object.
Who is that
Who
else?
is objecting?
Joe Quaz, South Carolina delegate.
All right, no. Is there any member of the executive committee who objects?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Mullen?
I want to make sure that we have time to debate. And if we spend all 2 hours in public comment, that will not be productive for this meeting. So if we're going to have this motion, then we're going to have to also add a limit on public comment.
Do you want to offer that as an amendment?
Sure. I'm trying to think about how much time. Let's say 45 minutes of public comment.
So public comment for 45 minutes.
I move to
Woman's
amend.
amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Phillips. Is there objection to that amendment?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
There is objection, so we'll proceed to debate on that. Mr. Molman, if you want to speak to your amendment.
I'm open to other times. I just feel as though it would be bad if we spent the entire meeting in public comment and didn't take any action whatsoever as a committee.
Yeah.
Venting frustration is good, but we also are here to try to do some business. So whatever that means, I don't know. I'm open to whatever.
Ms. Harless, you objected.
Yeah.
If you want to speak to your.
I actually
objection.
have an amendment, and I believe this is a second level of amendment, so it would be allowed. I would like to dedicate.
Sorry. So originally it was a motion, and then, yes, you are correct. Go ahead. Proceed.
Okay.
Apologize.
This is what I'd like to do. I would like to set aside an hour for public comment and an hour for us to hear, to debate and hear Mr. Molman's motion. We could always extend that second hour if we need to, but I'd like an hour for each, an hour for us, an hour for the public.
So you, Mr. Molman had proposed 45 minutes and you want an hour. That's the difference here.
And I'm adding a limiting, because somebody wanted an end time. So I'm kind of trying to accomplish everything. That we're doing a limit of an hour for us and a limit of hour for public comment, realizing that anyone can motion to extend time, but this is at least our framework.
Just to note, if we do this right now, it's 9:25. 45 minutes puts us at 10:10, and the end time was 11:08. So it's functionally the same thing right now. If we do 45 minutes.
I want the public to have an hour to speak.
All right. Carlos moves to amend to change it to an hour. Is there objection? Without objection. We're back to Mr. Bowman's amendment, which would be as amended, which would be an hour of public comment followed by an hour of business to adjourn at approximately 11:30 Eastern. Is there further debate? Seeing none, the question's automatically called. Is there objection from the executive committee on this motion? Seeing none, that's what we will do. And with that, we'll go to public comment. I have a queue here that I will go down and let's see. Is there a member of the executive committee that would be willing to assist on time?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Senator Upke.
We're going to do 1 minute.
So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to give who's next and who's on deck so that you can be ready. You can unmute yourself and launch your video. And then it'd be good if you give your name, your state, if you like, your favorite current Libertarian elected official, and then share your information to the committee, and then we will go on. So first I have Clint, followed by Steve Sheets. Clint?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Right.
To confirm, are we doing 1 minute or 2 minutes?
1 minute, I believe.
1 minute. Okay, very good.
All right. Anything else from any member of the executive committee before we dive into this? All right, seeing none. Clint, go ahead. Steve Sheets on deck.
Do we really want this to be the precedence? Do we want somewhere where we have someone that can flip a whole state's?
If you could give your name and your state, your full name and your state.
I'm sorry. I'm probably speaking out on my own state, but Clint Rapp, Oklahoma City.
Go ahead.
Do we really want to set the precedence where a state elected, and the national can flip a state? We don't want that. We want to have some kind of precedent set where we have to have some kind of accountability. Not just we can flip some votes and have no votes set into place. Like, that is what it seems. It seems like there's no votes in place in New Hampshire, but they have this new regulation in place.
Time.
All right, thank you. Next, Steve Sheets with Ashley Shade on deck. Mr. Sheets, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, for hearing me. Steve Sheets, Pennsylvania. I've seen a lot of conclusions being drawn by without the backing of much in the way of evidence. We have two paths forward. We can either do an impartial investigation that's not done by the LNC and not done by anybody involved, which is my suggestion, or we could allow New Hampshire to do their own thing and take this to court, because if there's any actual evidence of actual bylaws violations, that is the proper path forward. But regardless of anything else, I would prefer to see the LNC do an impartial investigation on what actually happened, who actually did what, and then start working through where we go from here, because we shouldn't be taking actions on things we don't know anything about. Thank you. That's all. I yield balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Sheets. I have Ashley Shade next and Chase Oliver on deck. Ms. Shade, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Ashley Shade, Massachusetts Chairwoman. And I agree with Mr. Sheets. We do not need or want the LNC itself making a decision on what the business of an affiliate is. It is up to an affiliate to figure that out. So we need one of two things to happen. We need an independent arbitrator because the LNC has publicly stated their own biases. Many of the officers should not be voting on this matter, and the LNC shouldn't be voting on this matter. Or, as was said, allow the affiliate to handle the situation themselves and figure out what is going on. I think those are the only two correct paths forward, and those are the only paths that don't tear this entire party apart and cause us to be completely dissolved. I yield the remaining of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shade. I have Chase Oliver next, followed by Tyler Walton. Mr. Oliver, go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I first want to talk mostly about the procedure that's been going on, and I echo the sentiments of others who have spoken, saying that this has shown many clear biases from people, and I think there needs to be either some sort of independent investigation into this, let New Hampshire handle New Hampshire first off, but anything that the LNC has purview over, I really think that the resource on the LNC of Matthew Buckman, who is an investigator by trade, should possibly be tapped. And we should really be paying attention to what legal counsel says with regards to what we should and shouldn't be doing as a national party with a state affiliate. I again think that New Hampshire needs to handle New Hampshire. And I think people who have gone into this with the intent to do anything other than that, I think is kind of a little crazy. I think it's, it's something that we need to be looking at. We're looking to you, the national party, all of our state affiliates. There's 49 other states other than New Hampshire. And we're looking to you to...
Sorry, that's time. I have Tyler Walton next and Ryan Brown next. Mr. Walton. You're still muted, Mr. Walton.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you for the time to speak. I think if you look at the two different sides of this, you see the sides that have been supportive of the messaging coming out of the New Hampshire Twitter and social media, the side that has been allowing Jim Crow comparisons, Holocaust comparisons, the side that has decided that we're going to pander to right-wing fools, and the side that is going against that. And I think the LNC has a good opportunity here to make a stance against those people who have been tarnishing the image of the party through just flagrant social media trolling, to put it the best. And what we should do is recognizes Mrs. Jarvis's actions and say, like, this is the line in the sand. We are not going to allow this activity anymore. All right, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. I have Ryan Brown next and Joe's iPhone on deck. If you could rename yourself with your name. Mr. Brown, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ryan Brown. I'm from North Carolina. I think that in the last week, we have two major issues that are coming to light. The first is, what is the officially recognized Libertarian Party in New Hampshire? Second, is this different than the party that was recognized nearly 50 years ago? And if so, under what authority was this change made? If you say that the Libertarian National Committee has not made any statement on this or any position on this, it is incorrect. Your letter was used, and therefore you, as a national committee, owe the official duly elected members of New Hampshire the right, or that you owe them the courtesy of recognizing them. I am a new member and I'm willing to fight the state, and it is unbelievably frustrating what has happened because of this. You need to do the right thing and not avoid the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I have, let's see, Joe's iPhone, if you could give your name and your state. And then I have Romo from New York on deck.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joe Quaz. Sorry, I was trying to adjust my name. I apologize. I just want to say that the elected members of, the New Hampshire Party deserve a little bit more credit to the people who they elected to be their representatives. I hope that you guys will take that into consideration of, who was elected to represent them, what happened with the chairman, what happened with the council members within their party. I think that needs to be priority. The people who showed up to represent the party need to be represented properly within the party. Again, Joe Quaz, I'm a delegate from South Carolina. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Quaz. I've got Romo from New York and then David Howman on deck. Sorry, I forget your last name.
Hallahan, that's fine. Hi, I am just here to register my disgust by certain members of the LNC with regards to the ongoing LPNH saga. To say some have acted improper in investigating this matter is an understatement. They have outright tarnished any iota of their ability to be impartial and quite frankly broken trust in the LNC as a governing body. The secretary has not only gone on a lone wolf investigation and accused other members of the board of malfeasance for a pro forma action, but already declared her stance publicly on a monetized platform in order to influence the court of public opinion. Never mind the outright childish bickering by the likes of certain at-large members and Region 3 representative who comport themselves more poorly than drunken toddlers who just learned how to talk. Any of those involved in the improper video investigation by the secretary should recuse themselves from any further investigation or vote on this matter, as the LNC has proven itself incapable of casting judgment on the proper outcome of the situation with impartiality by creating a process of conduct and investigation before actually conducting the investigation and deliver judgment. I believe any further matter should be sent to the JC. Use them.
Thank you. I have David Howman next and Matt Hicks on deck. Mr. Howman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David Howman, Arizona. I agree with what others have said before me that New Hampshire should handle New Hampshire. The LNC should stay out of it. I also want to speak to the disappointing and frankly embarrassing behavior of several members of this LNC. As someone who serves on the state board of my state affiliate, and to be clear, I'm not speaking on behalf of them, but simply as an individual, I am very frustrated to see my national front-facing leaders for this party engaging in sniping over email, and even privately, some of them are discussing whipping votes to remove our national chair before we even had a meeting. Those who have been doing it know who they are. I'm very disappointed to see this kind of action, and I believe that if we want to act professionally, we need to start at the top with our LNC. So act professionally going forward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Howman. I have Matt Hicks next, and I note that a member of our national committee, Joshua Smith, has his hand up. So without objection, I'm going to do him next after Mr. Hicks. Mr. Hicks, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Matt Hicks from South Carolina. I'd like to let you have Mr. Smith go before me as he's a member of the committee.
I like giving people notice that they're about to be called on. So I don't know, Mr. Smith, if you want another minute or if you're ready now.
I'm ready. Someone disabled my video, by the way. I don't know why, but
did that work?
Let's see. Yes, it did. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
I just want to. So I didn't write anything out like some of the other stellar speakers prior to me did, but I just want to remind everyone that I would also like it if the LNC could do a unbiased investigation outside of the purview of the LNC. But the problem with that is that our chairman sent a letter already on the 7th. And when we talked to Joletta Jarvis, she said that she had already talked to Joe, our chairman, about this situation before that letter was delivered. So our LNC has already gotten involved. That's the problem. And now we're being asked as a board to disaffiliate a duly elected executive committee in a state that we don't have any business doing that in. Okay. And so you guys are telling us not to get involved when our chair has already been involved, and we're being asked personally to disaffiliate. So I just want you guys to understand that that's what's going on here. It's not that we're just hopping in for our own accord.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Smith. Next, I have, let's see. Mr. Hicks, and then after him, Tyler Smith. Mr. Hicks?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to say that I want to thank all of you personally, because I've been spending quite a bit of time here in South Carolina grooming some legislators so that I can get them leaning more towards libertarian policy and legislation. And the actions of this body as a whole have completely fucking ruined that. Excuse my language. Sorry. Have completely ruined the last 3 years of work I've put in on that. Outside of that, all I would like to say is I want to second the remarks of, I believe it was Mr. Romo from New York, who spoke to people before me. He hit the nail on the head. If you're an LNC member and you have been publicly expressing an opinion one way or the other about this, before there is I'm sorry, the last part was you have an obligation to recuse yourself from any of these proceedings. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. I have Mr. Tyler Smith next, and then Mr. Jeremy Kaufman. So Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Yes, Tyler Smith, Arizona. My only observation, I have looked through this several times now. I was in Florida at their convention this past weekend and built a lot of successful bridges amongst the various factions in this party that are arguing and are causing a lot of less than reputable circumstance. And I would like to point out that during my my own look over bylaws and certain proceedings that need to happen, this is a matter, and most of you on the LNC, I do know personally, and I have actually spoken to several times, there have been some implications of ulterior motives. I do not believe that as a fact for anybody that is involved right now. I do think, though, however, it does need to be decided upon at the LNC in their purview of authority, that they move it to the Judicial Committee to be handled. And as such, the Judicial Committee should be able to, without a partisanship, be able to review the facts and handle it as they see fit to avoid any further conflict and fractionalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I have Jeremy Kaufman next, followed by Daryl Perry. Mr. Kaufman, go ahead.
Hi, I'm the guy who did the tweets. My favorite libertarian that's elected is Thomas Massey. Many people haven't answered that question. This has nothing to do with what was said from any of the LP&H accounts. This is a basic matter of procedure as to whether the LNC had the authority to do what they did, and they very clearly did not. It's not really a disputable matter. At this point, it's a given that LP&H will get its accounts back. Dave Smith is on our side, Spike Cohen is on our side, and all basic logic, reason, and decency is on our side. So this must be fixed immediately. It's really a question of who is involved. We need to investigate every single person that facilitated this ridiculous activity that caused tremendous damage to the Libertarian Party. I think it's a given that Joe Henchman is involved. He should lose his job, and anyone else that abetted him should lose his job. This entire meeting is an example of why the Libertarian Party is an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. This entire meeting, the way all of it is happening, is an embarrassment. You guys spend more time on this than lockdowns, and it's a complete vindication of why we're doing what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Next, I have Mr. Daryl Perry, followed by by Dan Lewis. Mr. Perry, go ahead.
Hi, Daryl Perry, former chair of Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, former gubernatorial candidate, former presidential candidate. And I want to give a little bit of background of how things were handled in New Hampshire for EC members prior to 2016. Prior to 2016, I served as both secretary and vice chair in different terms, and did not have access to the website, did not have access to any of the socials. When I got elected chair in the fall of 2016, I did wind up getting access to the website, and my policy was more hands make for lighter work, and gave everybody else on the EC access to the website and the socials. There's nothing written in any policy specifying that anybody has to have access other than the chair.
Mr. Perry, if you could give your last sentence.
Yep, I was just going to say there's nothing written in any policy saying that anybody
come on.
Chair has to have access. You think, can I finish without being heckled?
No.
Dilatory.
No.
Definitely not.
All right.
No.
Knock it
Stop
off,
lying.
or I will turn
No.
off microphone access to everyone.
Dilatory.
Mr.
Children.
Duggan, that's your one warning. You do it again, I'm kicking you out of the meeting. Mr. Perry, are you done? Did you have anything else?
Again, that there's nothing written in any policies saying that anyone needs access. And I would urge this committee to
Dilatory.
do a full investigation into everything.
This is bullshit. Why does he get full time?
Mr. Chair, this is way over time, please.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. And again, when you hear time, if you can move to your last sentence.
I was trying,
All right,
Mr.
next.
Bishop Hinchman, I kept getting interrupted.
Nonsense.
Yeah, Mr. Perry, thank you. Next, I have Mr. Mr. Dan Lewis, followed by Caleb Tibbetts. Mr. Lewis, go ahead.
I think this is actually a perfect time to make this public comment, considering what we just witnessed. And on behalf of the Libertarian Party Professional Wrestling Caucus, I would like to propose that we rename this meeting Libertarian Party Professional Wrestling Caucus presents LNC Cage Fight. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Caleb Tibbetts, followed by Mike Ross. Mr. Tibbetts, go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'd like to start this off as saying that I work with the Mises Caucus quite a bit. My county chair is Mises. With that being said, what happened in New Hampshire was completely over the line. We needed to maintain some standard of professionalism and integrity as far as an official state affiliate goes. And New Hampshire specifically failed to meet that. And I do think the LNC is within its right to intervene and make sure things get cleaned up there. I cede the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. I have Mike Ross next, followed by John W. If you could rename yourself for your full name there. Mike Ross, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Mike Ross, North Carolina. I'm just going to hit on one thing. As North Carolina, we generally care about North Carolina. My concern is that this whole shit show and I'm sorry for the language, in New Hampshire should reverberate through every single state. And here's why. We're looking at getting in bed with you guys with Civi CRM, with joint fundraising, with a whole bunch of things. And what we're witnessing is one state essentially having a chair say everybody else who was duly elected is no longer part of it and receiving access to those assets without the LNC coming in and saying, hold on, there's nothing in your bylaws or our bylaws that says you can do this. You're allowing theft of property. So why should our states involved with national, if our chair decides they don't like who's got voted in, they turn it over and you take all our data, access to our joint fundraising. It sets a horrible precedent, and I don't care which caucus did this to another. If you're being libertarian and intellectually consistent, shut it down.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Next, I have John Waldenberger, followed by Justice Armstrong. Mr. Waldenberger, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to second what Mr. Sheets said earlier, but I would like to speak and ask that if the LNC continues any further action, that Mr. Josh Smith and Madam Secretary Harlos, that you please recuse yourself, as well as anyone else that is actively involved with any caucuses, PACs, or whatever that are involved with the situation that happened in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Like Laura. Thank you, Mr. Waldenberger. Mr. Dassing, that's your first warning. Do it again. I'm kicking you out of the room. Mr. Justice Armstrong next, followed by Will Combs. Mr. Armstrong, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Hope you can hear me. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm here as not a member of the Libertarian Party, but as a friend of the Libertarian Party. I was an LP member from 2016 to 2018, and I left because I felt like working within the two major parties would be more effective. And now, as I'm getting closer to the Libertarian Party, there's one reason and one reason alone that I have not rejoined, and that is the Mises Caucus. I believe that their rhetoric and vile and violence-threatening rhetoric has poisoned the entire movement and has become a cancer on the party as a whole. And if I, as an outsider, can see it, I can only imagine that the detrimental effects to the party from Twitter alone this week have set the LP back 10 to 20 years. So I commend Joletta Jarvis and Joe Bishop Henchman and all of the other committee members who have sought to clean up this mess properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Next, I have Will Combs, followed by Thunder Hart. Mr. Combs, go ahead. Mr. Combs, if you're speaking, you're still muted.
I'm sorry, who?
Will Combs. All right, I'll come back to you. Thunder Hart, if you're ready. Oh, Will Combs.
Oh, still have another. Okay. Are they outside or inside?
All right, Miss Thunder Hart, you're up, and then we'll try Will Combs again.
Hey, I'm Thunder Hart. I'm the Northeast Oklahoma Libertarian Party Vice Chair. I'm glad to be here. I want to thank everybody here for setting up this meeting and for the entirety of the XCOM for being respectful, and for many of the speakers for bringing up their perspectives, regardless of which side you're on here. And I know I'm taking a lot of time there. I want to say that I think what National Chair Bishop Henchman said in his messages on Facebook, I agree with it. And I want to reiterate support for Bishop Henchman. I also want to say, though, that I hope that this is taken to the Judicial Committee. I hope that this is given due process so that both sides are able to show what their point is and what their argument is. And I also would like to note that there was a threat of violence in the comments on the part of somebody named Van, V-A-N-N, directed at the National Chair. So if we could take that person out of the chat, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Next, I have
Hello?
Gus Bookbinder,
Can you hear me?
followed by,
Hello?
Mr. Combs. I'm sorry, go right ahead, Mr. Combs. And then
Yeah,
after
thank you.
him, Gus Bookbinder. Mr. Combs.
I'd just like to say I've only been part of the Libertarian Party for a year. I just joined up here in Nevada, and I helped elect a unanimous MECOC endorsed slate here. And the fact of the matter is, Nevada used to be one of the strongest PRAG states. But the reason the MECOCs got elected is because they ran it into the ground. And right now, our PRAG chair, Joe Bishop Henchman, is running the LP into the ground by unilaterally and illegally intervening in the state affairs of a party that has not asked for his intervention, and in which he intervened prior to knowing that a split was coming, as he admitted in his own emails. And yet he offered Joletta Jarvis aid and comfort, as she's claimed, and as he's had yet to deny. And the fact of the matter is, if given that assets have been stolen, this is a criminal conspiracy, and he should be kicked off the LNC and even disbarred if he's been actively involved. So, yeah, this is ridiculous. This is an embarrassment. This sucks. And you should all be ashamed of yourselves, whoever of you were involved in this fiasco. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Combs. Next, I have Gus Bookbinder, followed by Mickey Mullen. Mr. Bookbinder, go ahead.
Listen, the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire is an embarrassment because of what they were tweeting, because of what they were doing before. You're not edgy. You're not waking up the masses. You're just racist. You're just homophobic. You're just disgusting. You're not libertarians. This is not a matter of legality and a matter of party politics. This is right and wrong. This is liberty and tyranny. And the fact of the matter is, the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire was a mess, a disgusting, vile cesspool. And anything that gets rid of them, I don't care. I don't care. So I commend the actions of party chairman and Jarvis, and they were right, and you can cry about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bookbinder. Sorry, muting people. Next, I have Mickey Mullen and Drake Lundstrom, and Mr. Van Gutier, rename yourself to your name or I'll kick you out too. Mr. Mullen, go ahead.
Good evening. This is Mickey Mullen, Chair of Membership and Outreach in New Hampshire. The LNC has the ability to restore access to our membership data, which we do not currently have. We're not able to perform normal functions. There are serious state and federal crimes associated with data theft, and I realize the rest of this has to be resolved, and I support an investigation into all that. But we had a very big event this week that we could not do any outreach or recruiting at. We also have a huge event coming up just next week that we also can't do our job at. And I would ask if there is some form of injunction or something that we could do to just get access to our data or a backup of it. We cannot access our member data, and people who do not legally have access, which is a serious, serious problem and a crime. I yield the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Let me see. I had Paul Grindle next, and then I know that a member of our committee, Dustin Nana, has hand up, and without objection, I'll do him after Mr. Grindle. Mr. Grindle, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me, sir? All right. Yes. Hi. I wanted to say two things mainly. The first is that the decision of which affiliate the LNC recognizes or not should not be based off of any opinions about the quality or statements or opinions of the membership of that elected body. If things are said or actions are taken that are believed to be in violation of our principles or the NAP or what have you, and that is grounds for some removal of an officer or a person, that the actual removal process should be done. And if an affiliate is so taken over that that process can't be done, then the case needs to be made in an actual motion to disaffiliate that's focused specifically on the allegations of what is so improper. So the idea that this should be a vote based off of what caucus is in control of the party is the wrong way to approach this. The right way to approach this is, what is the legal body that is the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire? Is it the body that's recognized by the state? And so if there's paperwork that wasn't filed that dissolved the original body, that body is gone.
Next, I have Mr. Nana, followed by Drake Lundstrom. Mr. Nana, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to speak to the issue at hand. I just want to remind commenters if they could please keep it to facts of what's going on rather than both sides pointing fingers at each other and this devolving into a caucus war, because that's not going to help us solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nana. Next, I have Drake Lundstrom, followed by Zach Britt. Mr. Lundstrom, go ahead.
Hello, Drake Lundstrom, Ohio. So I am in Ohio. I'm a vice chair of a county party. When I see what is happening in New Hampshire, that a party has been entirely in violation of the bylaws, had their data stolen, had their website stolen, had their physical property stolen, that seems very libertarian. It's something that the national committee should not support. And the purpose of this meeting seems to be to get the data back in the hands of the rightful owners. Also, there's been talk about recusing various members of the LNC. I do think makes sense to have an impartial judicial committee investigation. But for now, I would applaud Carlin Harlos for bringing together interviews of both sides on the issue. And then a brief personal aside, I am Jewish, my husband is trans, I am in the Mises Caucus, and I feel loved, supported, and welcome here.
Thank you, Mr. Lundstrom. Next, I have Zach Britt, followed by Bill, sorry, one second, Bill Barger. Mr. Britt, go ahead.
Hey, this is Zach Britt from Mississippi. I'm not here to talk to pick a side, because really it's none of my business what happens in New Hampshire. But I am here to report a conflict of interest in regards to one of the members of the LNC, Ms. Harlos. I'd like to start off by saying that I respect the secretary and I admire her hard work and dedication to both the LNC and especially the Historical Preservation Committee. However, there is a clear conflict of interest here that needs to be addressed. When all of the New Hampshire information was first coming out, she hosted a kangaroo court interview of the chair of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire and an interview of the members of the executive committee that were removed on her own personal monetized YouTube channel. This shows a clear conflict of interest because she's personally making money off of the drama of this affiliate. And this is also not the first instance of a conflict of interest with the secretary, even within the last few weeks. The secretary failed to disclose a donation that she had received from Tom Woods before voting on his approval to speak at the 2022 convention breakfast, demonstrating another clear conflict of interest. I would like to call on Karen Ann to recuse herself from any and all discussions and votes about the New Hampshire situation immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brett. I have Bill Barger, followed by Mara Stevens. Mr. Barger, go ahead.
Hi, Bill Barger from New Hampshire here. I'm on the Communications Committee. I'd just like to say the biggest concern here is that the LNC needs to resolve or at least clarify what this state of affiliation of New Hampshire is. The second biggest concern, which is actually probably a much greater concern for the national party, is privacy issues. If Gilletta Jarvis has started her own affiliate or her own organization, then we have essentially the site, all of the member information, their addresses, their phone numbers, potentially payment information is now in the hands of another organization who does not have permission to have this. This is a huge privacy breach. I can only imagine the legal implications of all this, but you guys have a big old mess on your hands. And I would say get that site back in the hands of the people who actually have the rightful ownership of that data. Not to mention all other concerns, but this is a terrible look. You know, do you want to have the state get involved to solve your libertarian issues?
Thank you, Mr. Barger. Next, I have Mara Stevens, followed by Teresa Gozart. Mara Stevens, go ahead.
How come I don't
all
get
right,
to speak?
there, sorry. Mars Stevens, I'm the Florida Region 8 alternate, I should say. I speak only for myself, not my party, none of the campaigns, What are you doing? This has been poorly managed so bad. Our chair won't say if he's involved or that he wasn't involved or that his letter was used the wrong way. Our secretary is doing kangaroo court interviews and making money from it. And everybody on Twitter just seems to want to influence the court of public opinion. Why did we not step in, return the assets as soon as it started? But PorkFest is in what, 6 days now. Let's hope we can still recruit off of that. What are we doing? This has just been handled so poorly. I hope to see a full committee, a full investigation into who all, including members of the LNC, what all happened. This should never have blown up the way it did. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I have Teresa Gozart, followed by Thomas Kastner. Ms. Gozart, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Teresa Gossard. I am from New York State. I am a chair of Tioga County, and I have watched this from start to finish. I've read all the letters, and it undermines every single affiliate, every single state, every single county, and national, their bylaws. It makes all of it irrelevant, and it gives nobody any sort of power. And at this point, anybody can claim an affiliate and their assets the way they like. I don't care what caucus you're from. I don't care what your stances are in the LP. This is a dangerous precedent to set for everyone. Now, I think that everyone, including people in my own state, in their committee have made their biases clear, as well as national, to include you, Mr. Chair. You've made your bias very clear. And there, yes.
You can finish your sentence.
Okay. And I think an investigation, a non-biased investigation, needs to happen from the party completely.
Thank you, Ms. Gozart. Next, I have Thomas Kastner, followed by Will McVeigh. Mr. Kastner. All right, we'll come back to him. I have Will McVeigh and then Andrew Roberts on deck. Mr. McVeigh.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to thank y'all for all the work that you're doing. I think you're doing a great job. I love everybody in this party, and the Fed, and the wars. Bigotry is repugnant, and taxation is theft. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McVeigh. Thomas Kastner, one more time. No. Andrew Roberts, followed by Zach Lakowski on deck. Mr. Roberts, go ahead.
Yeah, Andrew Roberts from Kentucky. I would just like to note that for me, I don't care about what's going on in New Hampshire. I'm cared about Kentucky politics. But my issue is what was the chair's involvement in this? I've yet to hear an answer on that. That's the only reason I'm here. I don't have time to attend the meeting on Friday. I don't have time to attend the meeting on Saturday either. I just want to hear tonight, what's the chair's involvement? That question is yet to be answered. I basically heard everybody else from both sides answer the questions rightly and wrongly. But the only thing I've yet to hear is, what was your involvement? I'd like to hear that by the end of the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I've issued 4 statements, FYI, on that. Next, I've got Zach Lakowski, followed by Amy Mason. Mr. Lakowski, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Zach Lahowski. I'm from Arkansas. Most of the comments that I had have been stated by previous speakers already. I don't agree with some of these red herrings being thrown out by some of our more belligerent commenters. This isn't about tweets. It's not about caucuses. It's not about the behavior of an ex-com, even if it wasn't necessarily the right thing to do. This is about the violation of bylaws, state and national. It's about the chairs of both the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire and the chair of the Libertarian National Committee circumventing their own bylaws, their duly elected executive committees, and their convention delegates to steal properties, physical and intangible. It's inexcusable. It's unacceptable. There needs to be consequences for opening the party up to legal challenges and destroying faith in the LNC among the state affiliates. These assets need to be returned immediately. There needs to be a vote on disaffiliation as soon as possible. I imagine those will happen tonight. And Mr. Bishop Hinchman should be removed from his position for his outrageous and illegal actions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lakowski. Next, I have Amy Mason, followed by Brian Elliott. Ms. Mason, go ahead.
So I just want to start by saying that the behavior coming from the LNC has been absolutely atrocious, bickering like children, conducting rogue inquisitions. It is no wonder why people do not take us seriously outside of our party or even within our party. The damage this has done to our candidates is unimaginable. Are we really any different than the other two major parties? There is doubt in the ability in the LNC to achieve the goal that those on the EC have set for tonight. I don't think it's possible to actually vote on what they're trying to do. I think it needs to be turned over to an independent third party, and a decision should be made after that investigation is complete. I yield my time.
Thank you, Ms. Mason. I have Brian Elliott next, followed by Mitchell Mankiewicz. Apologies if I'm butchering that. Mr. Elliott, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm the newly elected treasurer of Nevada Libertarian Party. I joined the Mises Caucus because after 64 years of life and a very successful business career, I saw totalitarianism descend on the formerly free United States of America. I looked around at who was fighting it. I looked at the Libertarian Party and I saw nothing. And so I joined the Mises Caucus and I joined a group that got elected to take over the party of Nevada. And we are going to fight for liberty. And if you guys want to mess around with this and steal stuff and do all this, you know, we have 250 signatures on getting rid of Tom Woods, and we have 5,000 signatures supporting Tom Woods. Wake the hell up. We're coming. We want our freedom back. We want the Bill of Rights to be restored, and you guys are in the way. Get the hell out of our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Next, I have Mitchell Mankiewicz, followed by Nolan Pelletier. Mr. Mankiewicz, apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. If you're speaking, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. My name is Mitchell Mankiewicz. I am a lifetime member of the LPPA. I am chairman of the Libertarian Party of Skokow County. And I am also a member of Outright Libertarians, the Radical Caucus, and the Mises Caucus. I believe that this bylaws violation that has happened in New Hampshire is egregious. There is only one duly elected executive committee. That should be the party that is recognized by the National Convention Committee. And I recuse the rest of my time.
Thank you, sir. Next, I have Nolan Pelletier, and then an account that says Mises Caucus, if you could rename it to your name. Mr. Pelletier, go ahead.
Nolan Pelletier, interim chair of LPNH. I really am trying to figure out how to squeeze this into 1 minute. So I guess I'm going to try to do the best I can. Since this is involving me, essentially, I would like to know how many members, I did send an email to you guys, how many members of this committee have reached out to me and made contact. If you could raise your hand, that would be really great. And I guess my second question is,
I did if you didn't see my hand.
I'm sorry, I'm on my phone. it's very difficult to see all this. So I do apologize. By what authority have you taken this? And if we are following the bylaws and you can just do whatever you want, why does this even matter? I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, sir. Next, I have Mises Caucus, if you could give your name and state. And then after that, Brett Ryan. Go ahead.
I tried changing my name on here, but I couldn't figure it out. Just saying, no investigation needed. Real quick, Brian Elliott.
Could you give your name and your state?
Jeff Douglas, Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Douglas.
Please restart my time. Yeah, so no investigation needed. Those of you saying that the LNC needs to stay out of it, the LNC started it. So the LNC needs to finish this thing. We could do this tonight with the XCOM by getting JBH to rescind this letter and maybe censure him for doing this unilateral action. Most importantly, let's get the data back in the hands of the New Hampshire crew. Pork Fest is coming up, giant recruiting effort. You guys are undermining. Get this over with, get it over with quick. I'm done. Mises Caucus, holla.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Next, I have Brett Ryan, followed by Craig Shute. Mr. Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think everybody has said everything, on either side of this issue. Can one of the executive committee members make a motion to end public comment and just, adjourn to having the executive committee discuss in the interest of time and to not repeat everything over and over again? It's obvious.
Hey, guys.
Many executive committee members have biases both ways. It seems obvious from an outside observer that the LNC shouldn't have any authority to just unilaterally disband a state affiliate, and because they don't like what they were saying without following any bylaws. So let's just end the discussion and let the executive committee deliberate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I have Craig Shute, followed by Otto Dassing. Mr. Shute, go ahead.
Craig Shute, New York. I just mainly wanted to say that I think it would be a lot more helpful if you were able to hear from the New Hampshire people with a little bit more time. I don't think there's any use in having 1 minute things from a bunch of people around the country. It would be much more helpful to hear from Nolan Pelletier and all the other people on that committee, and Gillette Jarvis if she's here, because they have information about it and we don't. But the rest of my time, I would just like to say I agree with the XCOM. I don't see how you can just take it away from them and give it to the chair. That doesn't make any sense to me, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Shute. I have Otto Dassing, followed by Joe Quas. Mr. Dassing, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for speaking out of turn. My name is Otto Dassing. I'm on the board at-large member of the Maryland Libertarian Party and also the vice chair of Baltimore County Libertarians. And I am also a state organizer for the Mises Caucus. And I just want to say that I think the events that happen in New Hampshire will have ripple effects to this whole party. And if we want to squash this whole talking about takeovers and everything else, it needs to be handled by the LNC. And you need to do what is right and give the party back to the people who voted, and the will of the voters needs to be respected. And I find it's an absolute disgrace that we have to have meetings like this when the people already voted. It doesn't matter who they were voted for, it was voted on. And that's what we were told when we started up joining up in the LP, was that our voice would count if we showed up, paid our dues, and did our due diligence. And I feel like we've been absolutely disrespected. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Mr. Dassing. I have Joe Quas next, followed by Robert Bovera Spina. And I just want to let everybody know, according to my clock, we have 10 minutes left in public comment. Mr. Quas, go ahead. Mr. Quas, if you're speaking, you're not unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to say, I realize that the problem in New Hampshire definitely needs to be addressed by the New Hampshire party, but I also want to make sure that it's abundantly clear that the national party definitely needs to pull their weight when it comes to backing up the elected party of the state. We can't let rogue affiliates just show up and pop up and have power out of nowhere. The national party really needs to be behind our actual state affiliates to make sure that they are supported by the national party and that they do have the backing of the rest of the party, regardless of caucus affiliation or anything like that. We just need to make sure that, if we've shown up to do the work and we've put in the time that we need to put in to make sure our state affiliates are successful, the national party really needs to be behind those parties that have been participating, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Quas. I have Robert Bovera Spina, followed by Rajani Mayatiko. Apologies, I know I got that wrong. Mr. Bovera Spina, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Robert Bovera Spina, California, Marin County Chair Pro Tem, and a member of the Mises Caucus. So I believe the best route forward is the national party must hire an impartial private investigation to get to the bottom of who supported this coup in New Hampshire. Once the private investigation finds that bylaws have been broken, that any member who broke these laws must be held to the fullest extent of the law. Any members who are found to have broken any of these bylaws, then their membership must be revoked and they must be permanently banned from the party. The LNC must stay strong on this matter and show true leadership by making an example of the perpetrators. The Libertarian Party is all about liberty and freedom, and what has happened in New Hampshire makes our party look like socialist Venezuela. I yield the rest of my time.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bovera Spina. Sorry about that. It hung up for a second. Ms. Mayatiko, followed by Todd Hagopian on deck. Go ahead, Rajani.
Hello, I'm Rajani Mayatiko, treasurer in Orange County, California, speaking for myself. Like many others, I am not convinced the LNC has any authority in this matter. The LNC should not have authority to restore access prior to the completion of an independent investigation, hearing, and decision. And if that means no one has access in the meantime, that's fine. I'm not sure how folks like myself are supposed to effectively advocate or campaign when our organization is publicly plagued by infighting. Some members seem unaware or incapable of professionalism. And finally, I condemn bigotry as irrational and repugnant and challenge each member of the executive committee to publicly do the same. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Mayatako. I've got Todd Hagopian, followed by Keith Knight. Mr. Hagopian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Todd Hagopian. I am treasurer of the Oklahoma Party, member of the Mises and the Radical Caucus. I reject the premise of this meeting as stated to decide which affiliate is the correct affiliate in New Hampshire. There is only one duly elected affiliate. That XCOM has chosen to suspend the chair who performed the coup. If she wants to appeal it to the JC, she is not going. And at that point, the LNC can be involved. But tonight, we should be focused on returning the assets to the rightful owners of the New Hampshire Party. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Hagopian. I've got Keith Knight next, followed by Adam G. If you could rename yourself with your full name. Mr. Knight, go ahead.
Keith Knight from Phoenix, Arizona. In March of 2020, the businesses in Arizona were completely shut down. People were not able to trade freely. In other words, the government was claiming ownership over our bodies and all of our property. The Libertarian Party was silent. It was only the Mises Caucus willing to stand up and unapologetically stand by the principle of self-ownership, voluntary exchange, and free trade. This is a coup. This is criminal. Angela McArdle for chair of the Libertarian Party.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Next, I have Adam G, followed by Max Lemos. Adam G, if you could give your name and your state, go ahead.
Hi, Adam Gallick from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I just wanted to point out that everybody's that is angry over tweets and messaging from anybody. We live in a free speech world. Anybody can say what they like. If you don't like what they're saying, engage them, talk to them. Any ideas about taking punishment for something that somebody has said like that? You know, I'd say that somebody earlier mentioned we got set back 10 or 20 years. I'd say more like 37 exactly. If we're going to punish people for expressing their beliefs, isn't that thought crime and against everything that we stand for? Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Next, I have Max Lemos, followed by Anthony Welty. Mr. Lemos, go ahead.
I'm Max Lemos from California. What this situation comes down to is whether Jarvis and by permission Bishop Henchman had authority to instate people in New Hampshire who were not elected. Those who have been agreeing with Bishop Henchman and Jarvis are doing so on the grounds that tweets by the New Hampshire party were not agreeable to you, and that perceived rhetoric is paramount to following bylaws and procedure. The Mises Caucus are libertarians and should never have been treated this way. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Lemos. I have Anthony Welty, followed by Anthony DeKubelis. Apologies. Mr. Welty, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the board for getting us together this evening. All the way out in Washington, we are feeling the ripple effects of this. Confidence in the institution that is the Libertarian Party is waning for a multitude of reasons. Data security, specifically in Washington. The idea that at a moment's notice, an entire state board could lose access to our data is unthinkable, no matter who's to blame, for what reason that it happened. This is most obviously the immediate pressing issue, in my opinion, that the LNC should be addressing and writing procedures going forward, whether or not there is a coup or a technical issue or a theft from a completely outside organization. We need to ensure that we have proper procedures in place to immediately address this. I appreciate my time and yield.
Thank you, Mr. Welty. I have Anthony DeKubelis and then Clint. Mr. Anthony, go ahead. You're still muted. Sorry, we can't hear you.
How about now?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you. What I have to say is brief. Anthony DeCabellis, formerly New York, currently Texas. And I think the LPNH that exists is the legitimate party. You really can't operate where someone can just leave, create a new party, and then all of a sudden there's two. So it's very simple. I'd like the LNC to recognize a legitimate party and unrecognize the imposter party. So if JVH, you could send her a letter not recognizing her as a party, I think that would be appreciated and set this straight. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Next, I have Clint, if you could give your full name and state, followed by Arizona, if you could give your name, and I'm assuming you're in Arizona. So Clint, go ahead.
Clint from Oklahoma. If we are so fragile that we can't abide by our own state laws, bylaws, that we can just create our own because the national chair disagrees with the way the state's going, how could we be anything but tyrannical? This is nothing but a power grab, and it needs to be squashed immediately. This is complete corruption from the top.
Thank you. Next, I have Arizona, followed by Andy Howington. Arizona.
All right, I'd like to make a note, regardless of who's right or wrong in this situation, regardless of who you side with politically, there have been death threats that I have witnessed, I have documented, and that's coming from one side. And I believe LPMC and Michael Heiss need to do something to address this and tell their people to chill the fuck out, because somebody's going to get hurt. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Andy Howington, followed by Starchild. Andy Howington, go ahead.
Hi, this is Andy from Arkansas. I'm sympathetic to your actions and the actions of Chairman Jarvis. If you've got an affiliate that's just taking over and going out of control, it's like, what else can you do? Especially when they're running the Twitter so bad. It's like, how are you even going to have a candidate run? I was like, this is a political party. It's not a social club. It's not a philosophical club. You know, people are talking about tyranny and stuff. This is a party. This isn't the government. I don't mind what y'all did, and I stick by you.
Thank you. I have Starchild next, and then we're out of time, and I'll bring that to the committee after that. But Starchild, go ahead. Yeah. Let's see. I sent an ask to unmute. I don't know. We can't hear you yet, Star Child.
Thank
There you
you.
go.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
I'm the chair of San Francisco LP, former LNC at-large representative and six-time Libertarian candidate for public office. I'm sympathetic with the concerns of Joetta Jarvis and the people that did this, but I think it's the wrong way to go about it. I agree that the assets should be returned. The elected members of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire leadership should be respected, and New Hampshire should deal with that if they want to recall those people. In the future, I think what we need is stronger ideological safeguards in place to make sure that people who are elected to party office or represent the LP as candidates, party office holders, delegates, or staff are strongly libertarian. We should be a big tent party, but not in terms of who we elect or allow to represent us publicly. Just like a church might welcome anybody to their church picnic or service on Sunday, but not let just anybody get up on the pulpit. I think we should have a Nolan chart litmus test, something like you have to be an 80 or 90 on the Nolan chart to hold one of these offices. And I would encourage everyone listening to think about adopting safeguards like this at your state level so you don't have this situation arise, because once it arises, obviously it becomes a big, huge mess. Finally, I condemn bigotry as irrational, repugnant, and contrary to the ideals of liberty, and I encourage all Libertarian Party members to do the same and to formally take that position. Thank you.
Thank you, Starchild. That exhausts the time for public comment. The chair will note we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 more people on it, and it's up to the committee whether we want to end now. Well, we're going to end now unless the committee decides otherwise. To go
I move to extend for 15 minutes to allow the 11 people who are presently in line and no further to speak.
Ms. Harlos makes that motion. Is there a second?
Seconded.
It's been seconded by, sorry, who was Mr. Phillips?
John Phillips.
Is there objection from the committee?
I actually have a question. Have any of the people waiting, have I already spoken?
No, these are all.
Yes, one of them has.
Which one?
I'm being told that Mr. Reinhardt has.
No, he hasn't.
Okay, then I stand corrected.
Okay. So any objection? Without objection. Mr. Lovell, sorry, next I have Jacob Lovell followed by Dave Benner. Jacob Lovell, go ahead.
Thanks, Jacob Lovell, Alabama Wiregrass region, Libertarian my whole life. I've had a lot of run-ins with the Meacocks. I'm a fan of the Mises Institute, but I don't really like the Meacocks too much. But I think the way that the party was taken over in New Hampshire is totally off base. That's totally wrong. This needs to be handed back over to the people that are running it there, not this takeover. That needs to be done away with at the national level. Yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. I have Dave Benner followed by Joe Garcia. Mr. Benner, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Dave Benner, Libertarian Party of Tennessee Communications Committee Director. I'm also on the Judicial Committee. I typically mind my own business when it comes to my opinions on what transpires in other LP state parties. But what happened in New Hampshire as of late is a literal coup. In fact, it's a bold-faced usurpation that would make Julius Caesar blush. There is only one recognized affiliate within that state, the same one that the LNC has recognized for decades. That has never changed, and that will never change so long as the LNC does not vote by a 3/4 majority that there is a different affiliate. So I'd like to ask all the LNC members and this committee to make them whole. That's the biggest pressing question. I would also ask them to be Catos and Ciceros rather than Octavians and Mark Anthonys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benner. I have Joe Garcia followed by Chase Crum. Mr. Garcia, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joseph Garcia, Chair of the Libertarian Party of North Carolina. I agree that some of the messaging that's come out of New Hampshire wasn't particularly good outreach at times and not something that I would want to go out from the LPNC's social media channels. But you know what else isn't good? Violating the rights and the will of the voting members of the LP New Hampshire, the people who showed up at the New Hampshire convention, and the decision made by our national chair to side with the rogue state chair there in this situation has disenfranchised the members of New Hampshire. As chair of the LPNC, my main concern is for the Libertarians of North Carolina. The members of my state should be the only ones to have the power to deal with any problems happening within our state without any interference from the National Committee. New Hampshire Libertarians should have been the ones to deal with their own problems in their own state. The actions of our national chair has given me pause in entering into any joint programs with the National Party, and that includes Civi CRM and the joint membership program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I have Chase Crum followed by James Daniels. Mr. Crum, go ahead.
My name is Chase Crum. I'm the chair for Tulsa, Oklahoma, and as a point of transparency, a member of the MECOX. I think there's a distinction between what has happened and how it happened. You can debate and investigate how it happened until you're blue in the face, as far as I'm concerned. What happened is abundantly obvious. A duly elected body was removed from their office. And I believe that anybody with any true faith in democracy at all would agree that they should be reinstated until due process has been afforded them. And then you can go back to whatever it is you'd like to do and make up whatever chair and bylaws you have to go with it. But until they're reinstated, everything else we're doing is pointless. It's an assault on democracy, no matter which caucus you're in, no matter what your beliefs are, whether you're Libertarian, Republican, Democrat, or foreign, it doesn't matter. It's an assault on democracy for an elected body, and it should be reinstated and then move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. Next, I have James Daniels followed by Stephen Nass. Mr. Daniels, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is James Daniels. I am a region rep in Florida. First, I'd like to applaud Karen Ann for the quick investigation that she did on this issue. It was very unbiased, and she got great information from both sides. I believe that would be either hidden or not produced if she would not have acted so quickly. I would also like to say that the state is autonomous because of the delegates that voted in that executive committee, and the national chair has no right to step in and overturn the votes of all the delegates in New Hampshire. And you should know that and probably excuse yourself from the national chair position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Next, I have Stephen Nass followed by Adam Reinhart. Mr. Nass, go ahead.
Hello, Stephen Nass, LPNH Executive Committee. I'll keep it real brief here. Joe, you and Gilletta and the 13 insurrectionists caused this problem. I think it's very damning that you haven't solved it yet, and that there doesn't appear to be a presence of those 13 people in this video here today. We really need this problem fixed very quickly, because we are a very active affiliate and we have stuff we need to do. I want to finish up my time here by saying thank you to the rest of my executive committee here and our other committees for continuing our work despite all these challenges we faced. And thank you to our membership for sticking by us through all this. We have a nice busy week ahead of us next week with PorcFest, and I think we're going to continue to achieve our goals despite these obstacles in our way. And I yield my time.
Thank you, Mr. Nass. I have Adam Reinhart next, followed by Scarlett DeWitt. Mr. Reinhart, go ahead.
Adam Reinhart, Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania, Eastern Vice Chair. I want to point out a couple of things that I have not heard mentioned in the interest of your time. Number one, the fact that the ExCom of New Hampshire was derelict in their duties for reporting to the state, allowing their state party to lapse into non-existence as a political entity while continuing to collect funds, putting their party at financial and legal risk of peril. Secondly, there was active discussion into not running a gubernatorial candidate among other candidates, putting our national ballot access in peril. And thirdly, to address this pernicious rumor that our chair, Joe Bishop Henchman, had anything to do with this, he sent a form letter of attestation on something that was not even contested at the time, something that he, as chair, has to do and does all the time. Okay, this pernicious rumor was started by one person, Karen Ann Harlows. She has been the only person that I know of on this LNC that has acted improperly. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Reinhardt. I have Scarlett DeWitt, followed by Christopher Sauerwein. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Ms. DeWitt, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is Scarlett DeWitt from New York. I am just calling in to say that this is an absolute crap show, and it's pretty sad because I kind of looked up to the Libertarian Party, but I don't know any other political party that would be completely taken over like this in any state. I mean, God forbid you guys got elected to be president, which I wanted to a degree. Honestly, the whole country would go to crap. So you better get your stuff together because a lot of people believe in you and you're just making a joke of everything and every person in this party, and it's not acceptable. You can't just overthrow a government that was voted in by the people. The government is for the people, by the people. So let's be adults, honor that, and prosecute the people who wrongly threw themselves in office in this coup. And that's all I have to say. Hope you guys man up. God bless America.
Thank you, Mr. Witt. I have Christopher Sauerwein, followed by Bill Hines. Christopher, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. I'd like to first thank Secretary Harlows. I think she's been incredible, very impartial, and that's what I would expect of our LNC. And I find it reprehensible that this is even a question. I think things need to be put back the way they were. The correctly and properly elected officials need to be effectively reinstated to their offices. I find it strange that one of the parties who are being accused right now is chairing this. I don't understand how that's possible. So to me, it seems like this needs to be sorted out and put back the way it was, and then an investigation held, and all the parties held, responsible to the greatest extent of the law possible. And again, thank you very much, Karen Ann, for being impartial. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Could you, how do you pronounce your last name, just so I know how to do it next time?
Sauerwein.
Sauerwein. Thank you, Mr. Sauerwein. Next, I have Bill Hines, and then Tyler Spear, and that will be it. Bill Hines, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Bill Hines, the current chair of the Libertarian Party of Delaware. And I'm really appalled that a travesty like this could happen. And I feel like the actions in New Hampshire are disenfranchising all libertarians in New Hampshire because they're put in a position where they have to pick who to follow. The rightfully elected folks should resume their positions in that state. And it should be up to the people of the state to change that if they don't like it. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. I have Tyler Spear, and that's it. Mr. Spear, go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'm the treasurer of the Berks County Libertarian Party, speaking as just a citizen, not official capacity. I think what's going on in New Hampshire is absolutely terrible. I mean, they had free and fair elections, and now they've been overthrown, and we need a complete investigation to see what the hell is actually going on up there. I mean, free and fair elections, and then the chair just goes and does what she wants. I'll yield my time.
Sorry, my computer hung for a second there. Thank you, Mr. Spear. That concludes public comment. Thank you, by my count, to the 64 individuals who spoke. And now we're back to business. I do have Mr. Hall, who, if the committee would indulge, wants to speak. Mr. Hall, are you available?
Yes, sir.
All right. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure who just answered before me, but yes, I'm here, and here at the request of the chair who called me a few hours before this meeting. I have not spoken with anyone on the LNC, or as a matter of fact, in the entire party about this matter until now, although I have been following the business list and trying to piece together the pieces as best I can. Obviously, this is a very contentious issue with strong opinions on all sides, and that's understandable. I'm not here tonight to offer any legal conclusions or any legal advice, really, other than to suggest that I've often thought that the LNC business list is not the best forum for conducting all types of business.
Objection, Mr. Chair.
Hang on. My computer's hanging. If you can hear me, my computer, hang on a minute there. Ms. Harlos, please state your objection.
My objection is that LNC legal counsel is retained to give us legal advice. He's not here to give us his opinion on our policy manual practices with the LNC list or transparency. I'm here to hear his legal opinion, and he said he doesn't have a legal opinion to give us.
Mr. Hall, are you giving us legal advice or your personal opinion?
I withdraw the comment about the business list, but I will give my legal counsel with respect to the matter, as I've thus far had an opportunity to review it. And that is that although I'm not prepared here tonight to offer any legal conclusions, I do think that what is in the best interest of the party is to establish a deliberative process that is transparent and that creates a public record that all parties to this dispute and all onlookers can refer to when evaluating the course of action that the LNC does or does not take with respect to this matter. So I think, like a lot of commenters tonight, I think that it does make sense for the LNC to establish some sort of independent committee or tribunal for the purpose of doing essentially fact-finding and to identify the relevant facts and to identify those that are undisputed insofar as that is possible, and to identify facts that are disputed, which seems more than likely that there are many facts that will remain disputed throughout this matter. And then to identify the various issues that need to be resolved. And then finally, the potential avenues for resolution, the alternative actions that the LNC might take, and the committee or whatever tribunal might be constituted could perhaps give recommendations either with respect to the best course of action, or at least with respect to the pros and cons of each proposed course of action. I know that there's a history, or at least a kind of a predecessor to the current situation, the Oregon matter that others have referenced. And my concern as counsel to the party is that there be some procedure, some process in place that will serve the party not only in this instance, but will establish a process for the party in the future to follow, one that the members of the LNC can rely on, and one that all members of the party and the general public generally can look to evaluate for their own benefit and come to their own conclusions as to the merit of the LNC's final course of action. But I think that that's my takeaway from tonight, is that it's very difficult to have an effective deliberative process when it's essentially being done over email and then culminating with a meeting with 500 some members done online. So that would be my recommendation for the immediate next step in this process.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Does any member of the executive committee have any questions for Mr. Hall? Ms. Harlow?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mr. Hall, would you not concede that we are primarily governed by our bylaws and that our bylaws do have specific procedures in place for disaffiliating an affiliate and further rights to appeal to the Judicial Committee?
Mr. Hall?
I believe so, Ms. Harlow. So I'd have to review the bylaws, which is one thing I'd like to do before I draw any legal conclusions about this particular matter.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. And I would really welcome hearing from you after your review of the bylaws.
Thank you, Ms. Harlow. Mr. Phillips?
Sorry about that. My fat fingers on my phone. Mr. Hall, all I want to do is thank you for your time as always. We always appreciate the effort you put into everything you give us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Any further questions for Mr. Hall? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hall.
Yeah, where should I wire the money?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hall. Well, now we're on to business, and I think Mr. Molman, you had a motion, so why don't we start with that?
Point of personal privilege first, sir.
Mr. Phillips, you can state your point of personal privilege.
Would it be possible to basically to forcibly mute the gallery from here on out, since we are here to conduct business?
I don't know the answer to that question. Mr. Harris, do you know the answer to that question?
I believe it would be difficult to mute the gallery without also muting the committee.
I mean, I will say that for a 458 person meeting, I think we're doing pretty good. I think we only had 2 or 3, maybe a couple more than that disruptions, but generally I think people are doing good. If that changes, maybe we'll have to do that. But yeah, everyone's doing great. All right, Mr. Molman, you've already distributed your motion and you've read it. I don't think you need to read it again unless anybody wants that. And so you can go to, well, first you've moved it. Is there a second?
I would second it, sir, but I will also move to divide.
Okay, well, why don't we get to that next, but it has been seconded. I'm going to deem there to be objection so we can move into debate. Mr. Molman, if you want to speak to your motion.
Okay. All right. And I realize that nobody is 100% satisfied with this answer, this motion. But my goal is to take a step forward and get us out of the gerbil wheel that we've been in for the past 3 or 4 days. That's my only goal in this motion. I guess my main concern at this point, Mr. Chair, and I actually would like to get a ruling on this. At least one LNC member has objected, not a member of this committee, but an LNC member, saying that this motion may overstep the bounds and authority of this committee. And I would like to hear if we do have the authority to take such action.
I'd have to know more about the nature of the objection.
I believe if I understand correctly,
just procedurally, you're raising a point of order on your own motion right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure we do this right, Mr. Chair. I do not want to, I don't want to break it worse than it is.
You can't raise a point of order on your own motion. That's like speaking against your own motion. You could raise a point of parliamentary inquiry to the chair. That would be perfectly appropriate.
Okay, and that's fine. Because I think once I made the motion, it's seconded. It's not really my motion anymore either. But the point being that I'd just like to get a ruling from the chair. Do we have the
It's not
authority?
a ruling when you ask a point of
All right,
order.
Ms. Harlow,
Just to make sure everyone knows.
let's just hear what he says and we'll figure out what
I just want to make sure we're allowed to do this. I believe that the concern is that the LNC member in question says that we have a meeting called for 2 or 3 days from now, and that this business should be shifted to the full body of the LNC.
And that's the nature of the objection?
That I believe that is the nature of the objection. I'm trying to look through the message to make sure that I have not misrepresented that in any way. But it is that we are circumventing the full board and that this should be held off because while the EC is enabled to act in between meetings, we already have a meeting scheduled.
I think it's only proper that we do know the identity of the objector. Members of the gallery are asking, and I believe for transparency purposes, they have a right to know that.
If the body will be at ease, I will review the bylaws to try to give an answer to this question.
Is there somewhere we can find the motion?
I will put the motion in chat for the gallery.
No, it only will suspend if the gallery will please remain muted unless recognized. And if you want to be recognized, raise your hand and it'll be up to the chair whether to be recognized. The motion is on the LNC business list, and I think it's been posted in chat at some point.
Mr. Chair, I just posted it into chat.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. So as best I understand it, the point raised is that this action is improper because we have scheduled an LNC meeting.
On the same topic.
On the same topic. I'm not sure what rule or bylaw that may violate. The executive committee is authorized to take actions properly noticed between LNC meetings. It's certainly within the discretion of the executive committee to take actions or not take actions, you know, wanting to defer it to the full committee. But I don't know if that's a requirement that would make me have to rule this out of order. So if anybody has any further information they'd like to add to that.
I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And I do as well.
All right. So I've got Ms. Harlos, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Wendt, Mr. Longstreth. Ms. Harlos?
The full LNC always has the ability at the upcoming meeting to override the executive committee. That is the fail safe. So I do believe you are absolutely correct that this is an order, and then the full LNC would have the ability to override, which is its complete right.
Mr. Phillips?
It gets into the reason that I was going to ask to move to divide, because then I was going to ask to move to amend. But I believe the objection is related to particularly the language referring to affirming the affiliation of the and the objection being that that is actions on affiliation are the responsibility of the entire LNC, not just the executive committee. So my intent was to move to divide and then move to strike that particular language, not to change anything other substantially, but just to make it that we were going to restore the property.
In that case, all right. Let me hear from the other speakers. Thank you for that information. That's helpful information. And then I'll make a ruling on that. Mr. Wendt, and then Mr. Longstreth.
On order, Mr. Longstreth should go before me.
Mr. Longstreth.
Mr. Phillips shared what my thoughts were in a probably a slightly more concise manner than I would have. So I'll just defer to him.
All right, Mr. Wendt.
I appreciate the indulgence, Mr. Chair, of the body. What I would say is that the actions of the executive committee, being a subcommittee of the LNC, will color whether or not we need to have the meeting on Friday and Saturday. And really, I would implore this body to do what you think is necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Wendt. Mr. Molman, this is your motion, so I'm going to ask you.
And that was new information, Mr. Chair, and I had new information then in response.
Oh, okay. Ms. Harlos, go ahead.
they are incorrect. The LNC has authority over the initial affiliation and disaffiliation. If the LNC had to weigh on reaffirming affiliation, it should have had to vote on your letter, which reaffirmed affiliation, which I don't think is your position.
Thank you, Ms. Harless. Mr. Molman, this is your motion. I understand this was crafted deliberately, so you may not be able to or feel able to answer this question, but is your intent to invoke Article 5 of the bylaws to affiliate a group, or is this in the nature of a resolution stating a position?
It was in the nature of a resolution for sure. We do not have the authority to affiliate. That is clear.
Okay. Given that Mr. Phillips intends to divide the question, I'm going to reserve judgment on whether, because I don't want to throw the whole motion out because of one clause, which I'm not even sure whether I would throw it out. So let me reserve judgment until we hear from Mr. Phillips on dividing, and the committee decides that, and then we can come back to it. How's that sound?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Mr. Molman, did you have anything further?
No, I'm open to amendments and better answers. This is what I was able to put together. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Molman. Mr. Phillips?
First of all, let me apologize to Mr. Molman. He actually approached me about this earlier, and at first glance, I thought it was okay. And then I just got busy and just didn't have a chance to really get back to him today. I would like to divide I would like to divide the motion to affirm and restore property from the portion of establishing the investigative body.
Mr. Phillips moves to divide. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Harless. Is there objection? Going once, going twice?
I'm going to object only because I feel like if we get
point of order.
Hang on.
Sorry. Yep.
All right. There is objection.
There's
We'll
a point
proceed
of
to
order
debate.
as well.
Ms. Harless raises a point of order. Ms. Harless, if you wait till I recognize you.
I didn't know if you heard me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Ms. Harless raises a point of order. Go ahead, state your point of order.
According to Roberts, on the request of just one member, a question which contains two independent questions can be divided upon the request of one member. It does not even require a second.
That
no
is
debate.
true,
It
but
is a
when
member
Mr.
right.
Phillips made his statement, when he spoke, he said he moved to divide, and so I'm treating it as a motion.
Yeah, but it's his right to divide it. Like, it's not a motion, it's a member right. He moves to divide and it's automatically granted.
Thank you, Ms. Harless. I'm going to treat the point of order as not well taken. And
I appeal the ruling of the chair.
All right, Ms. Harless moves to overrule the chair on the nature of Mr. Phillips's motion to divide. Ms. Harless, because you are seeking to overrule the chair, you can go ahead and speak to why.
You are permitted to speak first, or I ask tolerance to look up I didn't even expect this to happen, to look up the appropriate rule.
Okay. Under Roberts, it is true that you can do unilateral division. It is also true that you can submit it as a motion for the consideration of the body, just as you can submit anything else for consideration of the body.
Well,
Mr. Phillips chose not to do unilateral division because sometimes that's mean to do. Instead, he's leaving it to the discretion of the body, which is in his rights to do, and forcing this to happen without debate is harmful to the collegiality and our ability to get business done, because we're debating this now instead of something important. So I'd ask the committee to sustain my ruling.
And thank you. When a motion relating to, so we're talking, unfortunately, the language has not changed. My luggage contains the 12th edition. But on this, I happen to know that the language has not changed since section 27. When a motion relating to a single subject containing several parts, each of which is capable of standing, is a complete question. No, actually, I had the wrong thing. There are pardon me, I started quoting from the wrong place. There are certain motions which must be divided on the demand of a single member, in which case a formal motion to divide is not used. So in one sense, you are technically correct that he did a motion to divide, but all that's going to happen, and I would hope we would save time here, is immediately after this, if it's voted down, I'm going to exercise my member right to not do it as a motion to divide, and my right will have to be upheld. So I would suggest we just save time here, realizing I'm going to do that, and just divide it.
Thank you, Ms. Harless. I've already spoken on this. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the motion to overrule the chair?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Phillips.
I just would like to say that my motion was as you intended, as you spoke, was to allow the body to deliberate because for the exact reasons you stated. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. So the question is whether the chair's ruling should be overturned. A yes vote is to sustain the ruling and permit the motion as Mr. Phillips stated it. A no is to overrule and convert Mr. Phillips' motion into a unilateral division. There's just a few of us, so why don't we'll just do it quickly.
Mr. Chair, I point of inquiry. I apologize.
What is the point of inquiry?
Parliamentary. Can you restate the yes and the no again? Because that was a little bit complicated. I apologize.
Sure. Mr. Phillips has moved to divide. Ms. Harless objected, saying that it must be converted into a unilateral division. I ruled that both of those exist in Roberts, and Mr. Phillips chose to make it a motion. Ms. Harless ruled to overrule that objection. And here we are. So a yes would say Mr. Phillips is in order to move to divide. A no would say that Mr. Phillips is not in order and it needs to be unilateral.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Harless, do you have
with the indulgence of the body, I'll withdraw my appeal because I'm going to end up getting my way no matter what. So I want to save time. I'll withdraw
right now,
my
you're not
appeal.
saving time. Right now, we're spending more time.
I withdraw my appeal if the body permits.
It is
Okay.
the possession of the body. We're at a vote. Mr. Molman, did that answer your question?
I believe so, yes.
All right. So we will do a call. Mr. Molman.
Yes.
Mr. Hagan.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
No.
Ms. Epke. Ms. Epke, you're muted. You're doing thumbs up. I'm going to count that as yes. Mr. Longstreth.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed
Mr. Phillips.
Mr. Phillips.
I abstain.
Abstains. And the chair will vote aye. The chair's ruling is sustained. All right, where were we at? Mr. Phillips, you were on your motion to divide. And I think that's where we're at. Is that correct? All right. Mr. Phillips, do you want to speak to your motion to divide?
My motion to divide is simple. That the two are separate issues, and I believe that if you keep the meeting, if we keep it as one unit, it conflicts the issues and causes us to maybe vote one down when we would vote for that up, or vice versa, and creates a conflict that is unnecessary, and that two motions would be more appropriate.
Give it a second. Sorry about that. My computer hung there. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Ms. Harless, you're next.
I agree with Mr. Phillips. I have spoken with the aggrieved parties in New Hampshire, and if this is kept intact, I will be voting it down with a certain instruction from them to communicate a message to the LNC, which is not something I particularly want to say.
All right. Any other members wishing to speak on the motion to divide?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mullen, go ahead.
I recognize that each, we'll call it a side, on this debate is going to find something objectionable with this motion. in the end, the status of the LPNH is the topic at hand. One about getting the committee to their tools back. One about having them or asking the LNC to form an cannot speak anymore. But one about having a committee formed to investigate the situation. That's why I put them together. I realize that no one's going to be happy with the full thing. But I feel like unless we address both things, we're going to be stuck in some sort of loop where one side is super angry forever and one side, you know, I don't want to pick sides in this. I just want to fix the problems. So that's why I put them together. But I understand if the board wants to split them.
Is there further debate? Seeing none, the question's automatically called on the motion to divide. And I'll call a roll.
Mr.
Bowman.
Chair, typically the secretary does that.
All right, are you able to?
Yes, I am, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
go ahead. Secretary will call the roll.
I will vote yes. Mr. Hagan?
Yes.
You skipped Mr. Molman, sorry.
I'm kind of not going in alphabetical order because I have it, if that's with the indulgence of the executive committee, Mr. Molman.
All right, go ahead.
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Longstreth?
Yes.
Ms. Epke?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the vote is 5 yes, 1 abstention.
I vote yes. I'm guessing that's 6 to 0 to 1.
Yes, sir.
So the question's divided. We will take up, Mr. Molman, do you have a preference which one we take up first?
I do not.
All right, I'll just go in order of the motion. So the first one would be the executive committee of the LNC continues to recognize the LPNH affiliate, et cetera, et cetera. Where did it get divided, Mr. Phillips, if you could remind me, or Madam Secretary?
It got divided. This is the motion that's then presently before us. The executive committee of the LNC continues to recognize the LPNH affiliate that held a convention in March of 2021 and directs the turnover of access to the LPNH joint assets in the possession of the LNC to that committee, unless until such time as the full LNC takes action to disaffiliate that committee in accordance with our bylaws.
All right. That has been moved. I think and seconded earlier, so we'll move to debate. Mr. Molman, do you want to speak to your motion?
Sure. The first half, I believe, based upon my reading of the bylaws of the LPNH affiliate, based upon the bylaws of the national party, that we do not have the ability to separate the body that met in convention with the assets that national provides. Our policy manual requires that we offer the same services to any affiliate party that has been recognized by the party. And while certainly there is a question of who should be the affiliate, affiliation doesn't follow an individual. Affiliation follows the body. It follows the bylaws and the convention body that created those set of bylaws, and the entire executive committee that was elected under those bylaws in convention. I understand that there is an argument about constructive disaffiliation. I do not believe that the bylaws permit that. I do not believe that Roberts permits that. And so while certainly I'm not a big fan of the way the LPNH Twitter has been run. It's not my call to make. What is our call to make is whether or not one group is an affiliate. And I do not see that the LNC has taken affirmative action to revoke that organization with that bylaws and that board to revoke their affiliate status. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molman. Further debate?
Yes.
Okay. I have Harlos, I have Phillips, and then without objection, Mr. Nikela. Harlos, go ahead.
Okay, without repeating what was already said, I will supplement it. We have not disaffiliated anybody. Therefore, the affiliate that existed 2 weeks ago is the same affiliate that exists today. They have removed Ms. Jarvis as the chair of that affiliate per their bylaws procedure, and have a new interim chair, and control needs to be given to that interim chair. In some sense, people are right that we cannot interfere in their internal issues. And that is exactly what we are doing by withholding their assets. We have zero right to do that until we institute, if we wish to, disaffiliation procedures. This all came up in Oregon. If we are allegedly so aggrieved by the behavior, be it Twitter, be it whatever it might be, of an affiliate, we only have one option, the nuclear option, disaffiliation. And there is zero question who's the legitimate affiliate. I completely object to that comment by my colleague. And in fact, if there was a question, which there's not, it wouldn't be between two competing affiliates. It would be between the affiliate that existed 2 weeks ago or nobody, because there's no such thing as transfer of affiliation status. These are brand new bylaws which have not been submitted to the secretary. This is a brand new association that's never filled out a petition for affiliation. They've just disenfranchised all of the national members, if they were the affiliate, by requiring a membership oath that none of our national members who pay money to this party have signed. There is zero question. The affiliate that existed at the time of the March convention is still the affiliate until the full LNC with a 3/4 vote decides otherwise. Letters from anybody on this body to the construment of otherwise, whether that construment is right or wrong, otherwise has absolutely no bearing. We are stealing their property until we give it back. And I demand that we give them their property back. And if we want to disaffiliate them, make the motion and have your name put down on that vote. For what it's worth, I will vote no on any motion to disaffiliate.
Thank you, Ms. Harlow. Mr. Phillips, and then without objection, Mr. Nikela and Mr. Nana. Mr. Phillips, go ahead.
Originally, I think I made it well known that my original intent was to, if you'll excuse the expression, say screw them both, and remove access to both parties. You guys sort it out and come back to us when you did. That was my original intent. I did some research. I talked to a lot of people, like most of us, since this has happened. I have been up till the wee hours of the morning working on this process. While emotionally, I still feel that way, logically and by the bylaws and all the rules of procedure and everything that I can come up with, Ms. Harlos is correct and Mr. Molman is correct that we have not disaffiliated them, and for us to remove things from their possession without that process first is absolutely incorrect. And so, despite my emotional urging to go one way, I am going to follow the process and support this.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Without objection, Mr. Nikela, then Mr. Nana, then Mr. Hagan. Mr. Nikela?
Mr. Chair, this past weekend I was at the Libertarian Party of Florida State Convention. There was a few other members of the LNC there, and while I should have been with my people at convention doing convention things, unfortunately this took precedent, and I spent the time interviewing both the original entity folks from the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, as well as Ms. Jarvis of the new entity, so to speak. From a few things that I've found from that original looking into the issues, the constructively resigned members were not resigned or removed via any kind of parliamentary procedure. That includes the EC as well as the Judicial Committee, Bylaws and Rules Committees. There's many reasons to believe that the original entity is still original, as nothing was done per the rules to make them not so. However, the new entity, so to speak, did go on with the Secretary of State and their state and did file as a new entity. There's some problems we'll address later. speaking with the old entity, they did lose access to their website, their social media, their data, and other assets what the LNC holds access to. They do have access to their bank account. They lost access to some assets in their dry storage to the new entity. So there's this tug of war between the old and new that we now need to address because the LNC got involved. So, you know, I've spoken to other state chairs. They're very concerned about what kind of precedent this sends as an LNC. We have members, we have affiliates, including my affiliate, that are worried about, do we have redundancy? Do we have backups? Who owns the domain name to the LPF? Because now, after building up this trust, there's concern over what the LNC has the power to actually take from these affiliates without notice. This is obviously an issue. We need to address this. We need to get recognize, get this affiliate's assets back to the original entity. And speaking with Ms. Jarvis, I did ask her the question, how come the original entity has the bank account? However, the new entity has both the assets in the dry storage and the other things. While she said for the bank account, it's given to them by the members. Okay, well, so is the data. The data was given to the old entity by the members. So it's obvious to me that even the new entity recognizes that the old entity has some assets, but we're ignoring some of the others. So bottom line here is we need to get everything either back to the old entity tonight or hold it in the interim, because we cannot allow this new entity, which has not been given authority by the LNC to exist, to have any of the assets that we hold in our possession. So that's my recommendation, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nikela. I have Mr. Nana without objection, and then Mr. Hagan. Mr. Nana, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I really am not going to be able to add anything that anybody else has not said at this point. But I will say that I agree with Mr. Molman, Mr. Nikela, Ms. Harlos, and Mr. Phillips that it really doesn't matter what was going on internally in New Hampshire. We have to recognize the affiliate that was the affiliate to begin with that was elected at the March convention. Whether or not the chair intended for the letter that was used the way that it was used to be used that way, it did get used that way, which is why we are where we are, in my opinion. So, you know, and now we have to resolve this problem. I don't think that we have the option of doing nothing at this point, unfortunately. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nana. Mr. Hagan?
Yeah, we've heard a lot from a lot of the public this evening about there's still some question in a lot of people's mind about which entity is affiliated entity, or if there is I guess most of them say there is affiliated entity, but which one it is. Main thing we're talking about here is the CRM, which has basically their members' private information. And we have this question. We also got a LNC meeting coming up in 3 days. A possibility, depending on what happens with the next motion, of investigation to look into which entity is affiliated entity. I think under abundance of caution, other legal risk, for one thing, that we should basically withhold the CRM from both entities until the LNC meets, and then they can decide, of course, what they want to do with this. It's only 3 days away.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Is there further debate? Ms. Ebke?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see both sides of this. I tend to agree with Mr. Hagan on it. I am concerned about the data. And while there is certainly dispute over which side is the legitimate holder of the data, given especially some of the comments in the comment section tonight, the vitriol, I would be really concerned with just opening up the data until we have it confirmed by the LNC as a whole, who we're recognizing, because if we give that data away, we no longer have control of it necessarily. So.
Thank you, Ms. Ebke. I have Mr. Longstreth, and then again, second round for Ms. Harlos and Mr. Phillips. Mr. Longstreth, go ahead.
So, like many of us, I have been very, very carefully weighing options, talking to people, getting very, very little sleep, and going through this process and trying to figure out the best course of action that this executive committee could possibly take. In my opinion, this meeting should not have happened. It should have been sent to the LNC. That is not how that played out. I understand that. I'm not going to fight that. It is what it is. We're here now. The question is it better for us to give the data to a new entity and keep it with the old entity, share that data between the two, or revoke completely? Those are our 4 options. From a standpoint of the national party, we have recognized an affiliate in New Hampshire. That affiliate, from my understanding, and mind you, the LNC has done no investigation. So any votes on this case right now, having done no formal investigation, just light casual interviews, as was put out to the by the secretary when she conducted them. There has been no investigation. But from my understanding and what I have observed, we have a state chair that was able to affirm that she was the state chair. She then decided that she was going to essentially create a new organization with new bylaws, new rules, and a new pledge to join. I think New Hampshire needs to figure out their situation, and New Hampshire needs to figure out what's going on. I do not think that this body or the LNC should interfere in any serious way. All of that said, right now, the LNC recognizes the New Hampshire affiliate that has been in existence for nearly 50 years. Mr. Phillips has probably the strongest point when he says to separate emotion and logic. In this case, logically, we have always recognized one party. That chair essentially left that party, and it would be different if that chair had continued on with the same bylaws. Then there would be a totally different conflict. But this is a new set of bylaws, which means it is a new organization. And as such, I do urge, and I don't urge, I will, however, be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Mr. Longsmith. I have Ms. Harlos and then Mr. Phillips. Ms. Harlos?
I'm not going to pretend to decouple emotion from this, because I find theft of property very emotional. I find what we are doing here, because the fact is that other affiliates could be next, including my own affiliate, to be a very emotional topic. And human beings are not Vulcans. We have emotions. There is zero question about who the legitimate affiliate is at this time. All the member comments in the world do not change the fact that the entity that we affiliated with is the entity that was at the March convention. I am appalled at the flagrant violation of our bylaws that is being done in this body. Appalled. There is a legitimate affiliate. Give them back their data. If you want to disaffiliate them, have the guts to make the motion. You have the right to do that. Give them back their data now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harlos. I have Mr. Phillips and Mr. Longsmith. I don't know if that was up from earlier, but your hand's up. Mr. Phillips?
I just wanted to address Mr. Hagan's point about 3 days. Unfortunately, there is a time-sensitive issue, as the members of that party brought to us in public comment regarding events ongoing in the state and their ability to utilize those events to recruit to the party, including Pork Fest coming up. And so there is a time-sensitive nature to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Is there further debate? Oh, hang on. Mr. Hagan fell out of the room. If we'll suspend for a moment until he's able to rejoin. Mr. Hagan, you're back. Did you have anything further?
No, I don't know if my computer like locked up and then soon shut down.
Point of personal privilege, sir.
Mr. Phillips?
Was Mr. Hagan able to hear my last remarks?
Mr. Hagan?
No, I was not.
For brevity's sake, there is a time sensitive nature due to events coming up.
All right, thank you. Is there further debate? Seeing none, I'll close this out. I will be voting no on the motion. There have been a lot of lies.
Mr. Chair, I object. You are chairing this meeting. I had asked you to recuse yourself from chairing this meeting if you wish to engage in debate and remove from your position of neutrality, and you declined. So you don't get the debate here. I'm sorry. That's just not how it works.
All right, I'm explaining my vote.
I actually object to that, and I've been objecting to this for a while. Under Roberts,
Ms.
the
Harless
chair.
objects
Thank
to
you.
allowing me to speak before we vote.
I actually object to you voting. That's highly improper under Roberts, and it's been done for this whole term, and I did approach you in private about it.
All right. What is your objection then, if you'll state it?
If you want to give me a moment to find the citation in Roberts that says the chair, in order to maintain their position of neutrality, should only vote to break or cause a tie. You don't vote. That's just not what, the chairs aren't supposed to vote. This is Roberts 101.
Roberts advises that.
It
but
advises it, yes.
All right. If you'll suspend. Roberts advises that for certain groups, but does not require that. Our bylaws state that I am a full member of the committee and a full member of the executive committee and am able to vote. And our bylaws trump Roberts. So I rule the objection not well taken.
If I will tell you that even Roberts says you can choose to ignore that. And I can tell you what the authors of Roberts have said in a forum when I asked about
Any
this
member
question.
of the committee can choose not to vote. That is true. But you are arguing that I am not able to vote.
No, I argued it is improprietous for you, not that you do not have the right to. You do. You have the right to act improperly.
All right. So I've ruled your objection not well taken. Do you want to move to overrule the chair?
No, I don't. You have the right to behave improperly.
All right. Ms. Harlow?
Mr. Chair, I would ask, as a personal point of personal privilege, that we do that you would remind all those attending, even though you are involved in this case, and maybe I should direct this to the vice chair, that decorum in this situation is necessary, that prescribing a motive of saying that you are acting improperly by voicing an opinion or voting is not the secretary's role. And if she has an objection, there is an avenue to do that by raising a point of order or ruling or motioning to overrule your ruling. We are starting to dangerously come close to that decorum line that I'm uncomfortable with.
Thank you, Mr. Longstreth. Article 7 of our bylaws state that I'm a member of the National Committee and that all members of the National Committee are able to vote. Prior to, I think, the 2014 convention, it explicitly listed the chair as able to vote. And that was proposed to be deleted as redundant. And in debate at that convention, it stated, of course, the chair as a member of the committee is able to vote. No one's ever going to argue that the chair is not able to vote. So let's take out this redundant language. That's why I'm able to vote. Okay. And there are a lot of provisions of our bylaws that require 2/3 of the entire National Committee, 3/4 of the entire National Committee. And everything I've ever heard in all of my time on the National Committee, the denominator in that is 17, the full members of the committee. So Ms. Harlos, are you going to move to overrule the chair, or are you done?
No, as I said, I don't deny that you have the right to, but
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, somebody called me to order, and I think I do have a right to respond to me being called to order.
Now we are on a vote.
Okay, I will reserve it for the LNC
list. We are going to
list.
do the vote, unless you have another point of order or any.
Oh, sexist.
I will reserve my Roberts argument for the LNC list.
Okay. Where was I? I'm going to vote no on this motion. here's what's going on. So there have been a lot of lies circulated about what I did and when I did it, which was unfortunate. I was asked to provide a letter, which every state chair has the right for me to provide. I did not ask why that letter was needed. I had a suspicion, which turned out to be incorrect. So I provided it, and then it was circulated. And honestly, the explanation for, if you read the explanation for what the letter says, and then you read the letter, there's a mismatch. And that has been the basis for a whole bunch of accusations about me, which is very unfortunate. And I find it very shameful at the people who have spread those accusations. So on the question in front of us, there is a reality now that we have two groups of people in New Hampshire claiming to be the New Hampshire Libertarian Party. From the moment that I saw the news of what was going on, I became very careful about any statements I made or actions I took, because I knew anything one step, one way or the other, will be taken as picking the side and deciding the question. So I didn't do that in all of the four statements. I've been consistent in saying this needs to be worked out by the people of New Hampshire, by the two groupings, because anything short of that, and we're just picking a side in a civil war, and if we think it's going to resolve the civil war, we're kidding ourselves. Instead, we're going to put us into an Oregon situation where we're picking a side and they're fighting it out. And that's what this motion would do, because it would, before the full LNC can meet, before the investigation is concluded, we will make the decision. And more problematically, what should have been a dispute within the state of New Hampshire, where we could have quietly tried to get them to work together or mediated or found a solution. Instead, both sides are running to the LNC to get advantage. And here we are providing it. And I will be voting no. So with that, Secretary will call the roll.
We didn't call the question. You don't get the last right to vote, and I raise my hand.
All right.
Orders of the day.
Well, the orders of the day are that we adjourn and call all questions. Or we call all questions and then adjourn. So
I said what I said.
I'm moving to extend time for 5 minutes. I believe every executive committee member that wishes to speak should be able to speak.
Ms. Harless moves to extend time by 5 minutes. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Seconded by Mr. Molman. Is there objection? Without objection, time is extended by 5 minutes. Ms. Harless.
Thank you to the body. The motives or whatever might have gone on with the chair is not on trial here, though I do hope at some point it is, to be honest with you. But the fact is, what the chair has said is absolutely incorrect. There is zero dispute as to who is the legitimate affiliate here, unless he can point to where the full LNC has disaffiliated the affiliate that has the bylaws that are on file with the secretary as per the national bylaws. There is zero question. The only reason there is a question is because of that letter. So any question is of the LNC's own manufacture. We cannot then turn to something that we caused ourselves as justification for us screwing around with an affiliate any longer. And I completely object to the characterization of the chair that aggrieved parties are quote unquote running to the LNC. That is infantilization of actual legitimate concerns of theft of their data.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Well, I'll just add to that both sides in the Oregon dispute pointed to bylaws infractions, and We had that debate then. Both sides were kind of right. Both sides were kind of wrong. Who knows where the answer was? But because we disregarded the facts on the ground and made it a legalistic bylaws question, and I say this as an attorney, we had 10 years of strife. So, being no further debate.
I'm raising my hand.
All right, Carlos, go ahead.
You are factually incorrect about the Oregon situation. Both factions disregarded the bylaws of the affiliated group and created their own bylaws. You are factually incorrect. The mistake we made in Oregon is that we should have just disaffiliated. And if we think that the New Hampshire affiliate has behaved so abominably, that's what we need to do here.
Further debate.
Speaking, recognized.
Mr. Nikela, go ahead.
Thank you. The Oregon situation is different in the sense that it's an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For better or for worse, they're going to have to figure it out on their own, and they've both crossed the line. In this unique instance of New Hampshire, we have a situation where the LNC did get involved, and Mr. Chair, you got involved with the letter. The new entity usurped the authority of the rules of the original entity. They went ahead and created a new organization, which the LNC did not officially deem to be a new affiliate. Your letter, unfortunately, has put us in a position, and for what reason, what machinations, I don't know. The LNC has now transferred access to party resources that are owned by the original entity, just as the bank account of $30,000 is owned by the original entity, as discussed and admitted by members of the new entity, right? So that is owned by the original entity. We cannot, as a body, say that we're just going to hands off, let them take the data. Either we take the data back and give it to no one, or better yet, we give it to the old entity who owns the data, whose members signed up for that organization, because now we have two legal organizations. One is signed up with the Secretary of State that is not the original organization. That's a problem in itself that needs to be addressed. But we have an original organization. So this whole mess started with the LNC getting involved. Now we have to get involved. Now we need to get the data back because that's rightfully where it belongs to. Then hopefully figure out the rest later. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nikela. I have Mr. Longstress.
For what it's worth, I just want everybody to be aware that neither party has New Hampshire Secretary of State status right now. Doesn't.
That's actually incorrect. Are we out of time,
excuse me.
Are we out of time, Mr. Chair? I will move to extend time for Mr. Longstreth if he would not scream at me, but I am asking if we are out of time.
I don't call time in the middle of people's remarks. I let people finish their sentence.
Okay, well, I will
All right.
be glad to
if
move
you will
to extend.
suspend. Mr. Longstress, you have the floor.
There is no New Hampshire affiliate filed with the SOS right at this moment. There is no recognized party officially in the state. This is all what LNC recognizes. This is what the LNC, not this executive committee. Regardless of what we do, this ultimately will be decided by the LNC. If we decide to transfer data tonight, in 3 days, it could be moved over to a different group. It could be revoked totally. This executive committee, in my opinion tonight, has been a farce. We have heard nothing but comments all over the place. We have debated procedure at least as much as we've debated substance. This is ridiculous, and only to just do this again in 3 days. 3 days. And if anybody, including the text messages I'm receiving from those who will remain nameless, thinks that there is a New Hampshire affiliate, go and search on the SOS right now. There is no affiliate in New Hampshire, according to the Secretary of State in that state.
Point of inquiry to the chair.
All right. I've got Mr. Phillips and Mr. Molman, and Ms. Harless has a point of inquiry. Ms. Harless, if you'll state is this a point of parliamentary inquiry or is it debate
It's
masquerading
factual
as a
inquiry
point?
and it's not interruptible. Everyone gets to go before me.
All right. I will do Mr. Molman, Mr. Phillips, and then Ms. Harless. Mr. Molman.
Okay. I just wanted to note, I certainly understand the Secretary of State issue. From what I can tell, and I will freely admit I have not dug into New Hampshire law, but from what I can tell, the filing that is missing is a campaign finance statement. It is not a legal entity statement. It is actually, there is a attempt to file a legal entity, and that they are showing on the SOS website was one of the things included in the large dump that I placed onto the list. And the Republican Party and one of the county Democratic parties has the same thing. The other question really is, do we care what the state says? I mean, would it be something that if the state decided that suddenly any of our state affiliates just didn't exist legally, we wouldn't recognize them? I think the key is our recognition. And so I'm hopeful that we recognize as libertarians that the state often puts burdens on us. State puts burdens that sometimes are quite unreasonable. And of note, this campaign finance report was never filed prior to 2019. At least it was not filed for the 2014, 16, or 18 elections. And so if we're going to say that filing this piece of paperwork makes them an affiliate or not, that means they never were an affiliate, and that creates all kinds of other weird chaos. So I'm hopeful that we recognize the LNC as recognized an affiliate in New Hampshire. It is the purpose of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molman. I have Mr. Phillips, and then I think we'll be out of time. Mr. Phillips?
Just real short. I understand Mr. Longstreth's point. I believe that our bylaws do not require us to be a state party to be recognized by the state.
And that was my point of inquiry to the chair.
I believe that is correct. Is there further debate? Since time is out, we will call both questions unless there is any motion to extend time.
I move to extend time for the purpose of postponing the second question to the full
Okay.
LNC meeting.
Why don't we do it this way? We'll do the vote on the first one, and then I'll recognize you on that motion. Is that all right? All right. Secretary will call the, excuse me. Does everybody understand what we're about to vote on the first part of the divided question? Anybody not understand? All right, Secretary will call the roll.
1 second here. I am going to vote yes. Mr. Hagan.
No.
Mr. Molman.
Yes.
Mr. Longstreth.
Pass.
Ms. Epke.
Abstain.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Longstreth.
Can I get the votes read?
Harlos, yes. Hagan, no. Molman, yes. Ebke, yes. Phillips, yes. I have not called for the chair, but
Correction.
He was abstained.
no. I'm sorry, Ebke
I
abstained. Excuse me. Pardon me, that was my error. So we have 1, 2, 3 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstention, but I haven't called on the chair, but he has indicated he would vote no.
No.
Okay, so that is, Mr. Chair, we have 3 yeses and 2 nos and 1 abstention.
Vote no.
That is 3 nos, 3 yeses, 1 abstention.
The motion fails. Ms. Harlos, I was going to recognize you for a motion.
Yeah, I move to, postpone definitely the second part of the divided question.
You have to extend time first.
Oh, pardon me. I move to extend time for 1 minute for the purpose of making a motion to postpone.
I think you better do more than 1 minute.
5 minutes.
All right. Ms. Harlos moves to extend by 5 minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Ebke. Is there objection? No, without objection. All right, Ms. Harlos.
I move to postpone the remaining question to the full LNC meeting scheduled for Friday.
Sorry, I was muted. Ms. Harlos moves to postpone to Friday, right? You said?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Phillips. Is there objection? Going once, going twice, without objection. Mr. Phillips, you have your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a artifact.
Is there any further business?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mullen?
Is it in order at this time for the body to consider the joint fundraising agreement with California, or do we need to call a separate meeting for that?
It is in order. Has anybody reviewed it? I guess would be.
I don't believe it's in order. It wasn't in
believe
the
it's
call
in
of the meeting.
All right. Sounds like Ms. Harlos will object, Mr. Mullen.
Okay, that's no problem. I just had a request from California. Pass it along.
All right. Is there any further business? Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Zebke moves to adjourn. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Hagan. Is there any objection? Without objection.
Now that we're adjourned, I'll tell the members in the gallery, you have the right to appeal this decision to the Judicial Committee, and you can count me as a signatory. Outrageous.
Karen Ann, I'm not sure that we can yet.
Yeah,
think
I believe you can. So we'll let the Judicial
Okay.
Committee decide that.
Okay.
We have stolen data. Shame on you all.
You and the bylaws do not specify that the executive committee can be appealed to the JC, only the LNC.
Nobody cares what Daryl says.
All right. I'm closing down the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Shut up, Daryl.
Everybody, guys,
No, fuck
everybody. Hey,
Apparently we don't
wait,
follow the rules.
Joe, can I say something real quick?
Mr.
Guys,
Mullen,
we're on the same goddamn team, guys. Come on. I know that I know we get divided.
The bylaws allow
Or thieves.
Thieves aren't on this. Thieves aren't
Fine.
libertarians.
We're our real enemy is the state, not each other. Please.
Then
Quit stealing from people like y'all are the state.
Yeah, if people like Joe Bishop Henchman are going to
If
defend
that
the
happened in
state,
my
then
state,
he's
I'd
the
be in my
enemy.
attorney's office at 8 a.m. in the
People
morning.
you support
filing a
don't believe
lawsuit.
that, Ken.
Felony theft.
You're
You guys
done.
are supporting a
Bunch of
coup.
lies.
All aggressors are our enemy.
Me,
Well done.
You are aggressors. Good job.
Request from the Wrestling Caucus.
If we don't
you
stand
are
up for
all
the
voted
stolen
out
data, we're
in
not
Reno.
libertarians.
See you in
Everybody
Reno.
speak.
It's bull.
Laura, why do you abstain from everything?
Complete
Take a stand.
takeover, no unity.
Come on, Laura, take a
Libertarian Party of Venezuela.
ECW.
All right. I
Everybody-
apologize.
Why do you take a stand, Laura?
No, anybody can file a lawsuit. Anybody can file a lawsuit.
All right. Thank you.
I apologize.
Go ahead
I
and
thought
the
we
call.
could do something
You should
positive.
apologize for not clarifying what you meant in that letter.
And
That was bullshit. That whole thing was complete and total horseshit.
It's kind of funny though.
All we're asking is you to clarify the letter.
Then
he
you
knew
want to play
exactly
League of
what he
Legends?
was doing with that letter.
If he
Why won't he
didn't,
say
he
it?
would have voted
One way or the
yes.
other. I'm not even making a claim on it. I'm asking him to claim it. One way or the other.
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Please end the chair.
we have the right to know.
Did not understand that this was a duly elected body. You do not deserve
Duly elected.
New Hampshire deserves better, and we all deserve better.